Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We got a great chat today going on about the Internet of Things, the role the network and data plays. I'm Larry Van Duzen. I'm the practice director for our wired and wireless business unit at Dimension Data. I have the pleasure of joining with me Kevin Leahy, who's our VP of Data Center and the all-knowing guru about all things data platforms and storage and infrastructure. So what I'd like to chat about today is the role the network plays, how that aligns with data center, this whole idea around digital and what the digital revolution is and digital transformation, and the lens in which we're looking at the Internet of Things more importantly or specifically, and how we're addressing some of those things. So as we go through this discussion, we all know that digital has become the new buzzword, and it's the new narrative associated with how clients are transforming. And we certainly see that there's tremendous potential for organizations to change. You know, as we look at the landscape and we take a little bit of look at history, this is not new in terms of the change and the rapid pace of change. In fact, you know, way back when in the Industrial Revolution, we actually saw the advent of new tools and processes that allowed people to become more productive. And you know, back then, what took days was able to be whittled down into hours with the adoption of new technology and the operational flow. We're seeing the same thing happening potentially in the digital revolution. Machines now being able to take and leverage technology to blend mobility, communication, collaboration, and the multiple customer contact channels that are now creating what we're calling the hyper-connected enterprise. But it's really based about two things: the data that people have access to and the way in which they're connecting to those resources. If we look at access, you know, and the fundamental change in the way which people use and consume technology, it's really how the organizations are operating. Data has now become the lifeblood of the digital enterprise, and data centers are adapting to create the power to turn big data analytics and to accelerate the decision making and to drive real-time action. The importance about that is that digital transformation is taking place and that businesses need the tools to be able to do this effectively. The idea of changing rapidly and exponentially can be very scary, but it also is allowing new models and new ways to engage. It's not really a nice to have. As new competitors are now threatening existing business models, and we were seeing evidence of that all the time, companies like Uber and Airbnb, they're challenging the existing paradigms that we've seen in business today. And as this risk continues to address the rapid pace of change, we're seeing more and more devices, more connection channels, more compelling needs, more compelling access for data and security. You know, the line of defense and the way in which we present data and access it needs to change as well. So as we look at the applications that are proliferating, and if we look at all the devices and all the ways in which we're connecting, we're seeing that connectivity is really the key to enabling the digital experience. The network is now becoming this platform in which all infrastructure is really being able to leverage and use it and drive a business digital strategy. In terms of the rates of transformation, we're seeing that as these new business models come out, unleashing the power of data so that they can access, view, and manipulate information for better decision making is really what is allowing us to respond faster, to create more agility. Things like cloud are the new consumptive models to leverage new access to data and connectivity. And more importantly, as new experiences happen, people are collaborating and we're seeing more employee experience. One of the things about the millennials is that in order for us to attract and retain, we have to change the way in which we engage and build a new digital workplace. And we need to restrict less with greater security, but also allowing us to be able to access things. The Internet of Things is actually an important pivot from that, because as things become more and more connected, and as we have more volumes of devices and data, the digital currency of the digital business is really data. And the Internet of Things is what's delivering the intelligence to leverage the data. So it's leveraging those data centers and the platforms. And as we see more and more things connect, it's predicted by the year 2020, more than 37 billion things will be connected to the Internet. That's more than more people on the planet, right? So it's not about just connecting the things, but it's about the data they produce and what we can learn from it. Technology and data really hold the key to transforming businesses into ways in which we're only starting to unlock and realize. And as we look at the platforms and as we look at the ways in which data is harvested, whether that's data at rest or in motion, we need to understand how analytics and cloud and the platforms that we use to leverage and analyze and correlate that data are leveraged. So Kevin, as I kind of explained, some of the landscape, and I looked at how we're actually connecting all these things, and then more importantly, how data has played such an important role. Could you maybe talk to some of the ways in which data is now, and the platforms in the data center are allowing us to connect, accelerate, and move through this digital transformation?
Sure, Larry, and I think I think you made some really important points here, which is first, data's always been the core of the business, but that business was held back by processing power, and so it only could deal with so much data, and so therefore the notion of gathering everything, if you couldn't deal with it, really didn't represent the biggest challenge. It's just, how can I compute faster? How can I process the existing information I have in a faster speed? Was sort of a decade or 2 decades of what infrastructure people worried about. Now if you step forward, if you think about cloud, while it's about automation, about a lot of capability, it represents the idea of limitless resources. I can compute as much as I possibly want to if I know what I'm looking for, if I have access to the data. So now the whole idea of how I plan an infrastructure is reversed. Right? I'm no longer based on how many processors and how many computers can I fit inside a physical boundary and how much can I cool them. It's now you step back and said, what's all the information that if I had it, I could make different decisions around? And then where would that come from? And how would I gather it? So it's not just the data that then comes in through traditional methods. It's gathered up, whether it's from machine devices or whether it's from mobile devices, people moving around, traffic cameras, whatever it is. But now, if I have access to all that, the big question is, what decisions would I make differently? And so therefore, you start to say, well, first step is, where do I gather the information, and where do I need to process it? So many times if you're thinking about the Internet of Things or big data, pick your favorite term, it really comes down to is where am I going to get the information and how much do I need to aggregate? So I'll take a simple example. In insurance, you start thinking about fraud. Well, I can learn about a lot of data locally, but if I move it across country, I need to remove information. If I move it across borders, which means I'm limited into what I can discover. So maybe I need to discover certain information local before I send it up to another location. But inside a manufacturing floor, we've done this recently, where a manufacturer said, I want to watch the data in terms of my maintenance data, my error rates, and things like that, and start to be able to predict when do I need to do maintenance on machines, how do I sort of predict what's going to affect my quality, how do I offset that so I ensure higher throughput and higher quality. Well, that data sits inside a factory, but if I want to correlate that across factories all around the world or send it back to the person who created the equipment I'm using, now I have to introduce new paths and new amounts of data. But what's interesting is the clients now are starting to say, no, I don't think about when I'm going to discard information. I'm going to start to think about how am I going to use this information? How long will I use it for? But I really might want to use it again because I haven't exhausted all the possibilities of it. So you hear things like all flash. I want to make decisions real time, very, very fast. So people are looking at a whole new sets of technologies that can disrupt that environment. But at the same token, they don't want to keep it all, but they want it available to them. So now they start thinking about, When do I privatize it, remove certain information? When do I perhaps move it out to a third-party cloud provider where it's incredibly cheap? I can start to take advantage of, I don't need it in my data center, but I really didn't want to give it up. And whether that's the medical devices and keeping things for the life of the patient, that brings some governance rules that maybe I can't move it to a third party, but I can move it to an offsite archival, perhaps. Or whether it's truly anonymized data and I can move it out to one of the large clouds, whether it's Microsoft or one of the other types of clouds. They really move it out where my cost to own that data is incredibly small and shrinking over time. So you actually think about moving the data through the life cycle and starting to say, but I want to be able to bring it back if I start to find a pattern, let's say a manufacturing defect. If I can say, well, I used to manufacture that before, what changed? I can pull back all that information and you might find a machine adjustment. You might find a change was introduced in one of the processes. Any number of things could be found if you can go back far enough. But you don't necessarily want to keep it all in one place. You want it on flash at one time. You may want to use it inside your data center for another. You may want to start to do traditional, big data sorts of things or business intelligence things, and look at it in more aggregate mass to start to find more subtle things where you need, many, many sample sizes for something rare, perhaps a medical defect. It might be one, in 10 million people. Well, you're not going to gather that in a single hospital. You're going to have to aggregate that across multiple sources of data. So you really start looking at, how do I marry the technologies to support the life cycle of the data? And how do I start to think about what are the rules and policies around there? And then how do we start to make intelligent queries? I think the key we're finding in the data field is people are saying, I need to get value quickly. I can't continue to invest, for perpetuity. And I actually saw, one vendor present to a client that said, well, you're going to spend 5 years to build this framework, but they couldn't describe what's the decision you're going to make differently 5 years from now than you do today. Clients are not seeing that. They're looking for immediate value and then a roadmap. So you'll start to see people say, if with this data, I can make these new decisions. And therefore, it's likely going to, whether it's going to be improved quality or improved, any number of things in terms of speed of execution, better decision making. But then over time, as I aggregate more and more, I can actually start to make decisions that I might never have considered, including design changes, process changes, and things like that. So there's immediate benefit, there's long-term benefit, and there's predictive benefit that says what are the things I can plan on doing in the future because I can start to see those sorts of things. And even a simple example as an IT infrastructure manager, predictive analytics on when might I see an outage, or when do I need to add capacity? Because I see more and more users at a certain point in day accessing certain resources. I might say, well, based on this, I can predict when I need it. So I don't actually have to see degraded performance before I actually add that capacity because I know when it's going to occur. Now, initially, I have to react, but future going, I can predict. And that's really what we're seeing is the desire to have the anticipated change. And we're seeing it across all industries. We're seeing it in manufacturing. You see it in traffic light patterns in cities. When you empty garbage pails in Barcelona. I mean, all sorts of interesting and novel things that someone might never have predicted. But if I know when a garbage pail needs to be emptied, I can actually change the patterns, save in terms of labor costs. I can change in fuel costs. All sorts of downstream benefits that on the surface might not seem that beneficial, but if traffic flows better, I save energy, I save cooling, I get more effective use of the people. That is actually real benefits from just little small amounts of information, but spread across aggregate patterns, and then making decisions in terms of routing, things like that, have real benefits. So I know I covered a lot of different ways we're seeing it, but I would say that at the core, infrastructure people are planning their data center and their infrastructure around the information. Go figure, data center, it's going to be based on data rather than around servers. And that, I think, is the core of it. And what new information will we have in the future as more and more things are digitized and more information becomes available?
Oh, great, Kevin. And I think you highlighted, I think, the specific answer that a lot of our clients are struggling with is once we connect everything and we have access to the data, it's not just about being able to process the data. It's about what I do in terms of the forensics and the ability to make decisions with that data, both now and in the future. And the tools in which we're doing that now have evolved to be able to digitize their business. And you spoke around a couple different verticals. The obvious advantage is that this is affected across all industries, and we're seeing many different use cases that are now being based on outcome-driven experiences versus just providing the functionality to be able to leverage the data and the digital experience. So I think it's clear, that clients are on their journey to transform. There's various stages to enable them to digitize their business and to be able to leverage the digital economy. I think the opportunity of cost of not doing anything is that there's the potential to be left behind. We're seeing a lot of that happen today, and the pace is probably going to accelerate. And at Dimension Data, we've been doing building and digital businesses for many years. In fact, we've been delivering IoT solutions for many years. We just didn't call it that. And as we look at how we're helping our clients through that journey, we have multiple ways in which we can offer solutions, whether that's on-prem, off-prem, in the cloud or not. Bare metal, it really depends on the use cases and what we're going to try to accomplish with that data. I think Dimension Data is well positioned to help our clients transform. This concludes what we were going to chat about today. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. I definitely did. It's always a pleasure getting a chance to talk with Kevin. If there are questions, I'd like you to send them out, tweet them to @dimensiondata.com. If not, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to the next opportunity we have to chat.
Thanks, Larry.